The most frightening line recorded in all the archives of the galaxy is not extinction-level event or supernova imminent. No. The one phrase that makes even the bravest soldiers go cold is, humans have entered the conflict. And I say this because I have witnessed what happens after those words. Commander Vax Torin of the Galactic Confederation's 7th Strategic Fleet stood on the observation deck, watching the endless swirl of hyperspace outside. His four eyes blinked one after another, a nervous habit he had picked up after 30 cycles of service. Around him, junior officers shifted in their seats, their scales scraping lightly against their uniforms. "Commander," Lieutenant Peary began, her translator making her voice crackle. "With all respect, humans are small and fragile. Their world is mostly covered in water. Reports say they've only just learned to travel between planets." Vax slowly turned all four of his eyes on her. "Lieutenant, have you ever actually met a human?" "No, sir." "Then close your intake valve and listen to someone who has." The room went silent. The only sound was the low hum of the ship's engines. Vax tapped his claw against the holographic table, and an image of a blue-green planet appeared. "Earth," he said. "The third planet circling an ordinary or yellow star in the arm of an average spiral galaxy. Nothing unusual except for what lives there." He enlarged the projection. The room could now see the hairless, two-legged creatures. These mammals may look unimpressive, but they are disasters wrapped in flesh. Lieutenant Peary, you laugh, because they have no armor. But let me remind you, neither does a plasma torpedo. You wouldn't want to hug one of those, would you? The hologram shifted again. "The Drazik Empire has just made a mistake that will be remembered for centuries. They attacked a human mining colony in the Epsilon sector. They think they can intimidate humanity, the same way they've bullied weaker species for centuries. What they don't understand is that they've just jabbed a sleeping predator with a sharp stick." At that moment, Admiral Quinzel entered the room. His massive body filled the space, and the weight of his medals clinked as he moved. Medals earned from countless campaigns, none of them against humans. "Commander Torin," Quinzel's deep voice rumbled, "the Council is worried about your advice to withdraw from the Epsilon conflict. They believe we should stand with our Drazik allies against human aggression." Vax couldn't stop himself from laughing. The sound startled the junior officers. "Aggression? Admiral, with respect, the Drazik slaughtered unarmed engineers and technicians at that mining colony. They wanted the asteroid belt for themselves. Humans haven't even responded yet." "Yet," the Admiral said firmly, sitting down in his heavy, reinforced chair. "Intelligence thinks their response will be calm. Diplomatic protests, maybe. Economic sanctions." Vax's upper eyes narrowed while his lower eyes widened, the Tyrixi sign of disbelief. "Admiral, let me explain something intelligence clearly doesn't grasp. Humans do not think like other species. When the Gragemeni attacked the Pleiades Confederation, what happened? 18 cycles of formal war, ending in a treaty. When the Vulturi Dominion invaded STI Alpha, the response was measured, calculated, eventual, compromise. That is how civilized races wage war." He paused, letting the silence hang. "Humans don't do that. They don't even have a word for proportional response. When they are attacked, they don't just fight back. They make sure their enemies never even consider fighting them again." The air in the room felt colder. Even Admiral Quinn looked unsettled. "Surely you're exaggerating. They only have one world, limited fleets, and permission to speak freely, Commander?" "Granted," Quinn said. "That exact thinking is why I'm afraid. Watch." Vax pulled up old footage from human history. This is from what they called their Second World War. A small island nation called Japan attacked a human harbor. Humanity's response? They didn't just defeat Japan. They built a new weapon unlike anything seen before, and they used it twice. The officers stared at the recordings of mushroom clouds rising above human cities. "They have fought thousands of wars against themselves," Vax continued, his voice steady. "Wars for resources, for ideology, for religion, and sometimes for no reason at all, just to prove who had the larger army. And each time, they perfected their methods. Each time they grew more efficient at destruction. Lieutenant Peary raised her hand carefully. But Commander, reports also say humans value peace. They've formed organizations dedicated to avoiding conflict. Vax clicked his mandibles in frustration. Of course they value peace, because they know exactly what they can do when peace fails. Their history is soaked in blood because too many underestimated them. They have a saying, si vis pacem, para bellum. If you want peace, prepare for war. The Drazic Empire is about to learn what that really means. Peace is only possible when everyone knows you're ready to unleash absolute destruction. Admiral Quinn stroked his chin tentacles. So what do you predict will happen? In less than 48 standard hours, Vax said coldly, the Drazic Empire will no longer exist as a functioning power. Gasps filled the room. 17 star systems. A military standing for 900 years. Impossible. Impossible, Quinn thundered. Their defense grid alone would require— You're still thinking conventionally, Admiral, Vax interrupted. Humans don't. Just then, the ship's AI spoke urgently. Priority communication from Central Command. The main screen flickered, showing a weary Confederation official. Admiral Quinn, Commander Torin, we have a development. 17 minutes ago, humanity issued a transmission. They declare the attack on their mining colony to be an act of war. They have given the Drazic Empire 6 hours to surrender all forces involved, pay reparations, and hand over leaders for war crimes. Trials, Admiral Quinn snorted. A standard opening move they'll negotiate down. The official shook his head. No, Admiral, they made it clear. These are not opening terms. This is their only demand. They said, and I quote, if the Drazic refuse, we will respond appropriately. Vax felt his blood chill. Have you warned the Drazic? Yes. Emperor Crow dismissed it. He said, and I quote, we will not bow to hairless primates with delusions of grandeur. Oh, stars, Vax whispered. He mocked them. He actually mocked them. The murders of 174 human civilians. The proof against you cannot be denied. The verdict is final. The transmission ended. For a long while, the command center was frozen in silence. 70 minutes, Lieutenant Peary finally whispered, her voice almost shaking. From declaration to complete victory, 17 minutes. Admiral Quinn slowly turned toward Vax. His face gave away nothing. You knew this was coming. Not exactly this, Vax admitted, but something close. Humans don't believe in long wars, Admiral. They believe in ending things fast, by hitting with overwhelming strength until there's no fight left. The Admiral leaned forward. But how? How did they reach this level of technology without anyone realizing? Vax gave a short laugh, though there was no humor in it. Because we weren't watching closely. We saw their space shuttles, their clunky stations, their public projects. We assumed that was all they had. We forgot the most important rule about humans. And what's that? Admiral Quinn asked. They separate everything, Vax explained. What you see in civilian life has nothing to do with what their military holds. Throughout their history, they've hidden entire programs for decades, whole industries developed in secrecy. That's how they've always operated. Vax gestured at the display where Drazic fleets now floated powerless. But there's something else about humans that makes them even more dangerous. They cooperate in ways most species can't. When they feel threatened, they don't split apart. They come together. Scientists who normally compete start sharing breakthroughs. Corporations that usually guard their secrets start pooling resources. The whole species moves as one. The Admiral's communicator chimed. He listened, then looked up, stunned. The Confederation Council is holding an emergency vote. They're deciding whether to offer humans a permanent seat. Vax nodded. That's the smartest choice they've made in years. Lieutenant Peary looked shocked. Smart? After this display of raw power? You think they should be rewarded? Reward? Vax shook his head. No, Lieutenant. This has nothing to do with rewards. It's survival. Humanity has just shown that if they wanted, they could dismantle any empire in known space without even firing lethal weapons. Bringing them onto the Council isn't a gift, it's recognition of reality. He stared again at the tactical screen showing the end of the 17-minute war. Humans have another saying, Lieutenant. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. I don't think they're our enemies, but they are now the strongest force in the galaxy, and I, for one, would rather have them sitting at our table than outside it. Admiral Quinn gave a slow nod. I'll support their admission. Good, Vax replied. And when you address them, remember one final thing about humans. What's that? They don't start wars, Admiral. Vax turned his 4 eyes toward the stars. They finish them. 8 standard months later, after the fall of the Drazik Empire, Commander Vax Torin found himself in an unexpected role, personal attaché to the human delegation at the Galactic Confederation Council. The Grand Chamber buzzed with tension. Representatives from 276 species filled the tiered rows, all focused on the 5 humans standing calmly at the center. Compared to most delegates, they looked small, almost fragile, but every being in that chamber knew size didn't matter anymore. I still can't believe they only sent 5, whispered Trabol, the Century delegate, his glowing antenna twitching nervously. Be thankful, Vax muttered. After what they did to the Drazik, they could have sent 1 representative and a potted plant, and we still would have voted them in. Ambassador Elena Reyes, leader of the human group, stepped forward. She wasn't dressed in military uniform as many expected, but in a simple flowing blue garment that shimmered slightly as she moved. No medals, no weapons, just calm confidence, Vax thought. Esteemed members of the Confederation, Reyes began, her voice strong but steady. On behalf of Earth and our colonies, I thank you for welcoming us into this honored body. We come seeking friendship, cooperation, and peace. A nervous laugh spread through the chamber. Peace, from the species that erased a 900-year-old empire in 17 minutes. The Grand Speaker Orvox, a vast gas-filled entity, floated forward. His translation sphere pulsed as he spoke. Ambassador Reyes, while we welcome humanity, many here are uneasy. Your kind has shown military power beyond anything we thought possible. Some doubt whether humans can truly join a peaceful coalition with such methods. Reyes smiled. For humans, it was friendly. For other species, the baring of teeth still looked unsettling. Grand Speaker, our history is indeed filled with wars and mistakes. But each conflict taught us the same lesson. Real safety doesn't come from winning wars. It comes from building conditions where wars never happen. That's why my team includes not just military advisors, but experts in diplomacy, medicine, trade, and culture. The Drazik incident was regrettable but necessary. What we'd rather do is share clean energy, advanced medicine, and art. The crystalline Valyrian delegate Zelika vibrated with suspicion. Pretty words, Ambassador, yet your species has set up military bases all across Drazik space. Actions speak louder. Vax cringed, calling out humans for military positioning. It was dangerous, but to his surprise, Reyes nodded. You're right, Representative, actions matter, which is why, starting now, 80% of those outposts will be converted into research stations, open to every member here. The remaining 20% will act as disaster response hubs for pandemics, natural catastrophes, and refugee relief. Gasps and chatter swept through the chamber. And there's more, Reyes continued firmly. We will share our quantum tunneling technology for civilian use only. Shipping costs across the galaxy will drop by 63%. Emergency response times will improve by 87%. Suspicion lingered. And what do humans want in return? Asked the Proxima delegate, arms crossed. Cultural exchange, Reyes replied. Humanity thrives on learning from others. We want to understand your histories, your arts, your sciences. We want to know how 276 species have held peace for so long, We have things to offer, but far more to learn. Vax could feel the mood shifting. Fear was turning into interest, even respect. But then the Grand Speaker's sphere dimmed. There is a larger matter. Long-range sensors detect a massive anomaly approaching from the galactic rim. Our scientists believe it to be a harvester, Hive fleet. The chamber fell silent. Reyes frowned. Harvesters? A hologram appeared, showing a vast swarm of insect-like ships moving as one. Not a species, Vax explained softly. Machines, self-replicating. They appear every few centuries, strip entire systems of resources, then vanish. The last time they came, 12 species lost their homeworlds. General Thomas Warren, humanity's military advisor, studied the image. And how do you usually respond? The speaker's glow faded further. We evacuate. Abandon systems. Save who? We can't. Nothing else works. The harvesters cannot be reasoned with, and they adapt. Energy weapons, kinetic, biological. Once used, never effective again. That's not strategy, Warren said firmly. That's surrender. Sarlacc, the reptilian coordinator, hissed angrily. Easy for you to say, you haven't fought them. No weapon works twice. Then don't use one weapon, said Dr. Ayana Khatri, the human science advisor, her voice gentle but clear. Use every kind of attack at once, across multiple directions, with no fixed pattern. Sarlacc barked a laugh. Theoretically, clever. Practically impossible. Our species have different weapons, different doctrines we can't coordinate. Dr. Khatri smiled faintly. Actually, we can help with that. The hologram changed, showing a vast neural network. This is Athena, Adaptive Tactical Heuristic Enhanced Neural Architecture. We built it during our conflicts with sentient AIs on Mars. Athena doesn't command your fleets, she links them. She translates doctrines, predicts enemy adaptation before it happens, and synchronizes every response. The military representatives leaned forward in shock. Are you offering us this system? Orvox asked cautiously. We're offering to lead a unified defense, Reyes said. Not because we want war, but because we refuse to stand by while any species is wiped out. Vax studied the humans closely. They weren't thrilled at the idea of battle. They weren't boasting. They were steady, unwilling, but ready. Why? Demanded the Archon of Bellatrix. Why risk yourselves for strangers? Reyes raised her head. Because that's what humanity does. For centuries we fought ourselves over things that could have been shared. We nearly destroyed ourselves. But we learned, painfully, that protection must cover all sentient life. We don't want to fight. But we will never let lifeless machines destroy civilizations while we have the power to stop it. The chamber erupted into debate. Some welcomed the human plan instantly, others doubted or feared. But one thing was clear. Humanity had just stepped fully onto the galactic stage. Detective Morrison always knew that sometimes old cases came back to life when no one expected it. At the Crenshaw County Sheriff's Department, the evidence room slowly turned into something like a museum of unsolved stories, boxes and bags, filled with reminders of lives that had been cut short or gone missing. Among those items was Jake's basecaster rod, stored inside evidence bag number 337. It had been photographed, tagged, and shelved years earlier, then forgotten. What no one could see back in the 1990s was that the handle carried tiny traces of blood. At the time, the technology simply wasn't advanced enough to detect or test it, so its secrets stayed hidden for decades. Time kept moving, one year after another. The community learned to live with the loss of Jake and Tommy, the way people live with an injury that never really heals. Their story turned into local legend, whispered among teenagers who dared each other to fish at Perdido Creek after dark. Parents used it as a warning, telling their children how quickly ordinary nights could turn into something tragic. In September 2018, Detective Sarah Martinez walked into the Crenshaw County Sheriff's Department. She was 48 years old, with 23 years in law enforcement, and known for reviving cases long thought unsolvable. She had left Birmingham's Major Crimes Unit to take on cold cases in rural Alabama, determined to use modern forensics on mysteries that earlier investigators couldn't crack. Sheriff David Coleman, who had taken over the office when Bobby Ray Hutchins retired in 2010, gave her full access to any case she wanted. When Martinez opened the Wilson Harris files, she found them just as Detective Morrison had left them: 3 cardboard boxes and 2 evidence bags. She spent her first week carefully reviewing every page: the reports, interviews, photos, and notes. She could tell Morrison and Hutchins had worked the case hard and had done everything possible with the resources available in 1995. But she also saw missed opportunities, things that modern technology could now re-examine. One item stood out to her immediately: Jake's fishing rod. It had been found 100 yards away from the truck, partly hidden under a log. The placement suggested it wasn't just misplaced. Maybe there had been a struggle. Maybe someone had deliberately tossed it. Aside, Morrison's report had mentioned dark stains on the handle, but in 1995 the labs couldn't identify what they were. Martinez knew exactly what she needed to do. She arranged for the rod to be sent to the Alabama Department of Forensic Sciences in Montgomery. With today's DNA testing methods, technicians could examine samples far too small to detect in the 90s. Using polymerase chain reaction, PCR, they were able to amplify even microscopic traces. The process took 6 weeks, but Martinez was patient. She had learned long ago that the best results often came to those who waited. While the lab worked, Martinez revisited the families and community members. Linda Wilson, now in her early 60s, still believed the case could be solved. She welcomed Martinez with cautious hope, though years of disappointment had made her careful not to expect too much. Carol Harris was harder to reach. After losing Jake, she had disappeared into a quieter life. Martinez eventually found her in Montgomery, living alone and working overnight shifts at a convenience store. In November 2018, the results came back. Martinez opened the manila envelope with steady but nervous hands. The lab had successfully pulled DNA from the fishing rod's handle. When the sample was run through CODIS, the national database, it came back with a hit. The blood matched. Robert Bobby Sullivan, a convicted felon. Sullivan was 52 years old, serving a 15-year sentence in Mississippi State Penitentiary for robbery and weapons charges. His record stretched back to the 1980s, with arrests for burglary, assault, and theft across Alabama, Mississippi, and Florida. Records also showed that in the summer of 1995, he had been drifting through central Alabama, picking up construction jobs and staying in low-cost motels. This was the breakthrough Martinez had been waiting for. But one huge question remained. Why was Sullivan's blood on Jake's fishing rod? And what role had he played in the disappearance of the 2 boys? On a cold December morning in 2018, Martinez drove to the Mississippi State Penitentiary to meet him face to face. The prison stood in the flat delta landscape, surrounded by razor wire and guard towers. Martinez had interviewed plenty of inmates before, but this time felt different. She carried with her the pain of 2 families who had lived without answers for 23 years. When Sullivan entered the interview room, he looked older than his years. His hair was completely gray, his skin pale from prison life, and his hands rough from years of construction work. But they trembled slightly, either from nerves or health problems. He couldn't keep his eyes from flicking toward the folder Martinez placed on the table. Martinez started slowly, asking about his background, his work, and his current situation. Sullivan answered politely, carefully, giving only what was asked. But the turning point came when Martinez slid a photograph across the table, a blown-up picture of Jake's fishing rod taken back in 1995. The reaction was instant. Sullivan sucked in a sharp breath, his whole body shuddering. His hands twitched toward the photo before he forced them back to the table. Martinez had seen that look many times before. It was recognition. "Do you remember this fishing rod, Bobby?" she asked calmly, though she already knew. For nearly half a minute, Sullivan sat in silence, breathing hard. Finally, his eyes filled with tears. The defenses he had held for 23 years were breaking down. Martinez explained the DNA results, how modern science had confirmed his blood was on the rod, how the database had matched it to him, and how records placed him in Alabama at the exact time Jake and Tommy vanished. His lawyer, a public defender from Jackson, told him to stay quiet. But Martinez could see the truth in his face. Finally, Sullivan spoke in a voice so soft she almost didn't hear. "I've been waiting for this day for a long time. I knew someday the truth would catch up with me. I just never thought it would take this long." Martinez leaned forward, holding his gaze, knowing the moment had come. And with his hands shaking uncontrollably, Robert Sullivan began his confession, ready at last to reveal what really happened on that summer night in 1995. Ambassador Reyes laughed softly. "And what's the answer to that question, Commander?" Vax's four eyes blinked in order before he replied. "First, humans would try every possible peaceful solution. If that failed, they'd strike so hard that the problem, and anything like it, would never trouble anyone again. And after that, they'd immediately start working on ways to make sure no one else ever has to face the same danger." Reyes nodded with a smile. "Yes, that sounds exactly right." Vax turned his gaze toward the hall, watching dozens of species mingling, beings who had once been strangers, rivals, even enemies. Now they were talking, exchanging ideas, and laying the foundation for something greater than any single world could have built alone. His voice grew quiet. "Do you know what truly unsettles me about humans?" Reyes tilted her head. "What's that?" "It's not your weapons, your battle strategies, or even your technology," Vax admitted. "What unsettles me is how quickly you make everyone else begin to think the way you do. The Confederation existed for 3,000 years before humanity joined. Yet in less than 1 year you've changed how we handle trade, diplomacy, even science." Reyes considered his words. "And you see that as a problem?" "No," Vax answered honestly. "In fact, it's remarkable. But it does make me wonder, what will this galaxy look like after a full century of human influence?" Reyes smiled with calm certainty. "Peaceful, I hope. Cooperative, curious, still diverse, but united on the things that matter most." "And if a new threat emerges," Vax asked seriously, "an enemy that can't be reasoned with or understood?" The ambassador's face grew firm. "Then they will learn the same lesson others already have, that while humans do not begin wars, humans finish them," Vax said, finishing her thought. "Yes, I remember." Reyes shook her head lightly. "Not exactly, Commander. What I was going to say is this. Humans don't start wars because we work to prevent them. Through understanding, through communication, through cooperation. And only when all else fails do we respond with overwhelming force. And we use it, just once, to end the danger for good." She lifted her glass. "To peace, Commander. The kind that's hard won, carefully maintained, and always protected." Vax raised his own glass, his four eyes steady on hers. "To peace, Ambassador. The human way." The hall was slowly emptying as delegates returned to their home systems, yet the weight of humanity's presence lingered like a quiet gravity. Commander Vax Torin moved alongside Ambassador Reyes, weaving through clusters of alien representatives, who paused to watch the humans walk by. Even after months of working with them, he still found the calm confidence of these 5 humans disarming. "Do you ever get tired of all this?" he asked quietly, nodding toward the throng of species, still buzzing with curiosity and speculation. Reyes shook her head. "Tired? Not really. It's fascinating, really. Every species brings a perspective that challenges us, and each time we learn something new." Vax blinked his 4 eyes in sequence, processing the thought. "You thrive on complexity, then. On uncertainty. Most species would collapse under the pressure." She smiled faintly, a touch of pride in her tone. "We don't collapse, Commander, we adapt. And if adaptation isn't enough, we innovate. That's how we survived everything we have." Vax glanced toward the observation window where the stars stretched in infinite depth. "And yet, despite your adaptability, despite your power, there's Still a humility I sense in all of you. Even after what you've accomplished against the Drazik and the Harvesters, you do not flaunt strength unnecessarily. Reyes laughed softly. Humility isn't weakness. It's perspective. We understand that power is meaningless if it isn't used responsibly. You saw what we could do. You saw how quickly we can dismantle a threat. The galaxy now knows that. But we also know that fear alone cannot hold civilizations together. Trust, dialogue, and cooperation. These are the only tools that ensure lasting peace. Vax nodded, but his mind was already racing ahead. There's a problem coming, isn't there? Something you haven't mentioned yet. Something the Council hasn't flagged openly. Reyes's expression sharpened and she leaned closer. You are observant, Commander. Yes. Intelligence has picked up anomalies near the fringes of Confederation space. Not harvesters, not traditional fleets. Something different. She gestured toward the stars outside, where the void seemed deeper, darker, as if swallowing the light itself. We've seen signatures unlike anything cataloged before. Energy readings, movement patterns, they don't match any known civilization or machine intelligence. Vax exhaled slowly. You mean something that could rival even the Harvesters? Reyes hesitated. Potentially, and it's approaching faster than we expected. Our scouts suggest that if we are not prepared, several border systems could face complete annihilation before the Confederation can respond. He could see the tension in her eyes, the quiet resolve she carried as if the weight of humanity. And, now this unknown threat rested squarely on her shoulders. What are your preliminary assessments? He asked, already knowing they would be unconventional. Dr. Ayana Khatri, standing beside Reyes, stepped forward. Her calm voice cut through the hum of the chamber. Commander Torin, we've analyzed the energy signatures. They appear to be a hybrid of biological and synthetic elements. They are capable of self-repair and can adapt at a rate faster than anything humanity has faced before, including the Harvesters. Our simulations suggest that if left unchecked, their expansion could consume multiple star systems within 87 standard days. They do not seem interested in diplomacy, negotiation, or trade. Their priorities are unknown, but preliminary patterns indicate resource acquisition on a scale that would devastate any inhabited system they encounter. Vax's upper eyes narrowed while his lower pair widened in concern. Then we must act quickly. The Confederation fleets are capable, but not with current coordination. Athena can help, but only if everyone integrates with it fully. That requires diplomacy, compliance, and trust on a scale I've never seen enforced so quickly. Reyes nodded. Which is why we're assembling a joint task force now. Not just humans, but every willing Confederation member. The task force will operate under a decentralized command model. Athena will facilitate communication and coordination, but local initiative is essential. Every species has a role, and every individual must act independently while remaining synchronized with the greater objective. Vax processed this, his thoughts racing. It's audacious, he said finally. To assemble a coalition on such short notice, across so many cultures, with such high stakes, most would falter under the pressure. Reyes smiled again, but it was not warmth this time. It was a quiet steel, the kind that had carried humans through millennia of wars, plague, and interplanetary expansion. Commander Torin, we don't falter. We adapt and we ensure success. That is what humans do. But we need you to help guide the integration. Your understanding of the Confederation, your trust, and your experience with alien military and political systems, these are invaluable. Vax inclined his head. I will do everything I can. But what about the civilians? The planets in the path of this anomaly? Reyes's gaze hardened. Evacuation is priority one, but evacuation alone is not enough. We will pair rapid extraction with automated defense systems designed to delay the advance. Our goal is to minimize casualties while preparing the fleet for a decisive strike. She turned slightly, addressing Dr. Khatri. Begin finalizing threat analysis and adaptive response matrices. We need at least 73 scenarios calculated within the next 18 standard hours. Commander Torin, I will need your input on diplomacy, coordination between species, prioritizing systems for defense, and establishing clear lines of authority. Vax nodded, feeling the familiar tension of responsibility settle across his exoskeleton. Understood. This will require unprecedented communication and rapid decision-making. The key will be trust. Every species must believe in the human's strategy and in each other. Any hesitation could be catastrophic. Reyes gestured toward the holographic display showing the mapped trajectories of the anomaly. Trust is earned through action, Commander, and we will act decisively, not reactively. Over the next several hours, the command chamber transformed into a hive of activity. Holographic displays floated above tables, mapping potential intercept, vectors, evacuation routes, and resource allocations. Representatives from 43 species moved with an unfamiliar synchronization, guided by human advisors. Vax observed, his four eyes tracking every move, noting the subtle but firm authority of the humans. Despite being outnumbered, outgunned, and operating on a timescale far shorter than any Confederation mobilization had attempted before, they orchestrated the chaos with a precision that left him awestruck. General Thomas Warren, the human military commander, addressed the assembled fleet coordinators. We will not allow history to repeat itself. Harvesters taught us what happens when unprepared systems are abandoned. This time, we will prevent annihilation, not merely react to it. Our operations will be multi-vector, adaptive, and relentless. Every unit is empowered to act decisively when opportunities present themselves. Remember, hesitation is a liability. Confidence is our shield. Vax leaned toward Dr. Katri. They speak as if they know victory is certain, yet every simulation shows uncertainty. How can they maintain such composure? Katri smiled faintly. Commander, humans thrive in uncertainty. Their entire evolution was shaped by unpredictable environments. They are trained to calculate risk instantly and act with precision, even when odds are unfavorable. That is why they rarely panic, even in the face of near-impossible scenarios. As the hours passed, the first automated scouts detected the anomaly's advance. The readings were staggering. Structures that defied conventional understanding, movement that bypassed known physics, and energy signatures that seemed to adjust in real time. They're faster than the simulations predicted, Vax muttered. Reyes's expression remained calm. Expected. That is why we have contingency plans layered over contingency plans. Athena's adaptive network is learning simultaneously. Every fleet maneuver, every defensive action, every strategic shift is being fed back and recalculated. The anomaly will encounter multiple adaptive algorithms, each more sophisticated than the last. Night fell across the human planetary system, but the command chamber never dimmed. Lights from holographic projections bathed the room in blue-white radiance. Reyes and her team worked tirelessly, coordinating with Confederation liaisons and human fleet officers across thousands of kilometers. Vax noticed the subtle energy in their demeanor, focused, determined, yet calm. Even under the pressure of an impending galaxy-wide threat, there was no fear. Only preparation. At 18 standard hours into preparation, the first engagement began. Human and allied ships intercepted the anomaly at the outermost inhabited system. Unlike previous encounters with the Harvesters, the anomaly adapted instantly, firing unpredictable energy pulses and deploying swarms of mechanical probes that disassembled anything in their path. Confederation ships faltered under the chaotic assault, but human vessels moved with fluid precision. Their pulses of energy synchronized with Athena's calculations, creating controlled disruptions in the anomaly's systems, neutralizing small swarms and stabilizing the front lines.